The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome into the Coach Bill Clark Show. Landry Roberts and the Coach Bill Clark. Coach, episode 14, as we continue to roll through the college football season. Something feels a little bit different, though, this week.
Yeah, I think the elephant in the room is where's Pat?
Pat Smith not with us today. Did not see him on the participation report. And I think that this, once again, reminds us and echoes what's going on, not only in college football, but college athletics. And it's with a lot of these student athletes, and Pat is the same. It's a me-first mentality.
Yeah, big Pat, little team.
Big Pat, little team. He does have a valid excuse. I think he is decorating Christmas cookies right now.
It's that time of year, so we know where he's
Pat,
at.
hope you're enjoying the show.
Enjoy,
we'll try to make it without you.
Pat.
Yeah, season's greetings, Pat. All right, Coach, let's get into it. Fun weekend last weekend. Pretty uneventful here in the state as far as Alabama and Auburn. Let's start with the Alabama Crimson Tide. Really the final tune-up before two pivotal games, one on the road that we're going to talk about, Norman, Oklahoma, but also the Iron Bowl coming up next weekend inside of Bryant-Denny Stadium. From what you saw from Alabama, was it a check in the positive column for four quarters, or were there things that you didn't want to see?
No, I think really it's exactly what they wanted. One, they came out well. You would think, obviously, they looked ahead, for Oklahoma, Auburn. I'm sure they used that time, at least from a breakdown standpoint. Morale-wise, I saw a lot of really good things as I watched things about the walk-ons and how their team was getting those guys out front, and they were really happy to see those guys. And I love to see, like a bench, even in basketball, where you see that walk-on that comes in and hits a shot or whatever. So I think that's great camaraderie. They got a lot of guys in. Defensively, this takeaway theme that they're really getting. They got 3 takeaways in their last 5 games, which puts them number 3 in the country. They do a takeaway circuit, which I started years ago, and a lot of really good coaches do this. And I think you're starting to see that out of their defense. So the discipline, and we're going to talk about their game coming up here in a minute, but I thought they got to see those things injury-free, so it was a great performance.
Well, for the starting 22 on both sides of the ball, the 11 on both sides, what were you looking for in your coaching experience and being a head coach and leading a program and going into a game where you knew you had some really big games and a lot of opportunities ahead of you, but what were you looking to accomplish with those guys against a team that was obviously out-talented and outmatched?
Yeah, you want to see people do their job, not pre- and post-snap penalties, dumb penalties, discipline, still playing hard. I mean, we're trying to get better, and I think that was always a theme of the teams that I coached. I want to make sure we were getting better every week. So when we played those teams, and this is a chance to work on some things maybe we want to work on, to show some things, to make the teams coming up have to work on. So it seems like they accomplished all that.
The Auburn Tigers, meanwhile, coming off a bye week, taking on a friend of ours and a former offensive coordinator of yours, and Bryant Vincent and Louisiana Monroe. They had the 5 wins earlier in the season. They're still trying to get win number 6 to get the second ever opportunity to play in a bowl game in that program's history. Unfortunately, though, it was another team, another opponent that the Warhawks faced that were coming off a bye week.
Yeah, so this will be some good things for our listeners. What do you do when you play 2 Power 4, Power 5, old days, Power 4 teams that are really good, Texas and Auburn? We go back to 2014. We just got to UAB. We played Mississippi State. They ended up being number 1 for 7 straight weeks, played them very well. Well, then we got Arkansas at the end of the year. We go into that game, we're beat to shreds. Bryant was kind of in that situation. So he looked back to that and said, look, we want to win this Auburn game, but he's got 2 games he's make or break games to be bowl eligible. We were in that same boat. We were able to beat FAU after that Arkansas game. So I think that's kind of what he's looking at. Now let's talk about Auburn. Obviously, they were excited to get Cam Coleman, their big-time freshman receiver, get him on track, 3 touchdown catches. Thorne had 5 TDs. So, it was a big day for them. I thought, their running game, Jacquez Hunter had, now he's over 1,000 yards. I know one of the things Coach Vincent talked about was Auburn's third down defense. The same look, and this is something you want to go back and look at it, but given that same look where, 2 linebackers, you see those 2 linebackers mugged up in the A-gaps, we can bring zero pressure. We can drop out and play cover 2, 2 deep zone. You can play some man-free off of it. So their defense is doing a really good job. Give them credit for the design. And, Coach Vincent really echoed how well they're playing on third down.
The offensive side of the ball, I want to go back to that. And Peyton Thorne, he hasn't been bad in every single game this season. He was really good in some of the throws, a touch throw that he had and a couple of touch throws he had during that game. What were you able to take away if anything, from the bye week and maybe schematically on the offensive side of the ball, what we might see and anticipate from the Tigers against Texas A&M and Alabama?
Yeah, and we're about to talk about that game. And I think they wanted to get their passing game going. They wanted to get these receivers the ball. I mean, you're always thinking about getting these guys for the future untracked. So there's these games coming up, and they're trying to play to their future as well. But I thought they threw the ball well. They were at 0 penalties for the game. I mean, that says a lot about their discipline. So I think offense, defense, statistically, they've been there. These upcoming games for them is going to be about turnovers. Can they run the football, and can their defense stay solid?
Meanwhile, the UAB Blazers went on the road once again in American Athletic Conference play, taking on a familiar foe. It was the 17th installment of the Battle for the Bones versus the University of Memphis. And for UAB, much like some of the other games that we've seen this season, Coach, even with mistakes in the first half, you found yourself only down 10, 18-8. I thought it was a pivotal moment, though, when you were able to kind of steal a possession right there before the half. You get the ball coming out in the second half, and they came up empty both times. Yeah,
you got a red zone turnover. You've got that. Those are the things in those games you can't do. And what happens, though, and I think where the disappointment comes is those games where this thing just does like this. You're there. I think athletically they're close with Memphis, but to see that thing get wide like it did at the end, I know it's very disappointing. They're going to have to look ahead. They've got 2 games. I think they can win and focus on this game with a Rice team who's playing without their head coach.
It's a Rice team that, and you would know this from your time there at UAB, but it's always, for some reason, it's been a tough matchup for the Blazers no matter how the season has gone. And it's a Rice team, as you mentioned, they're without their head coach, but they're going to play disciplined football. Yep. And they do some things schematically on the defensive side and changing the looks. And I can remember talking with Bryant Vincent, your former offensive coordinator, going into this game and saying how many different looks he would see from them on the defensive side of the ball and coverages and blitzes and stunts. Yep. You never got the same thing twice.
Yeah, we always had tough games. We had great, never had a problem until 21. We had a penalty on a touchdown throw at the end of the game. But what they did, I won't get into that. I'll get upset. But the thing they always did, they were so smart. They got such, you got high intellect players there, and so they schematically could give you tons and tons of different looks, a lot of pre-snap disguise on defense. Offensively, of course, they're always with that run game with multiple O-linemen, and they could get those guys in. So that's still what they're doing, and from talking to coaches that are still playing on this, that stuff has not changed. So smart guys on defense. They're one of the top defenses in the conference. So kind of like Connecticut, where you've got a really good defense coming in against an explosive UAB offense at least. So we'll see what happens.
And the bright spot for the Blazers, your 2 wins this season, they've come inside a protective stadium, but also, and you mentioned UConn, that was a game that you played pretty well. You led 20-3 at the half. So hopefully for the 19 seniors who are going to be honored on Saturday, they're inside a protective stadium. They can send not only themselves out, the rest of their teammates in that program, but the fans who fill up there in Midtown and Uptown and try to get it done.
Yeah, and I have some of those guys still that played for me that are seniors. There's a few guys that are still left from when I was there. So wish all those guys the best and appreciate what those seniors have done for the UAB program.
Well, Coach, you mentioned Rice, especially on the defensive side, how smart the Owls are. There's another company right here locally that's pretty smart as well.
Yeah, our friends at Smart Bank. And I think really this is really the thing that stands out to me. And we talked about it last week. Small town banking feel, which, you go in, they know who you are, great service, all their locations. I think, and I get to talk to these guys being on the advisory board. So great service, but all the amenities of a big bank.
Well, it's now time for our Web Concrete and Building Supplies building blocks to victory, and they don't come any bigger, not only for Hugh Freeze, but this Auburn football team in 2024 still chasing that elusive quality win, if you will, Coach. And I think they got a great opportunity to do it there in front of the home crowd under the lights at Jordan-Hare on Saturday night.
Yeah, so you had the open date leading up, before Monroe. Obviously, they've done some work going where we're talking about Texas A&M or Alabama. We know Texas A&M is so good up front. They got all those NFL bodies. What can Auburn do, especially on first down? I think Coach Freeze talked about this. We're going to see more throw. Their success, though, is when they've rushed for over 150 yards. So Texas A&M's their front. Obviously, Texas A&M's got everything in front of them. So this is a huge game. Auburn's crowd, as we know, such a home field advantage. I think they're going to be loud when they get there. But they're 4-0 this year when they rush for over 150 yards.
What are the keys besides rushing for over 150 yards, but through the passing game? What would you like to see, whether it's from a game management aspect or from Peyton Thorne? What different wrinkles do you think they can implement, have success with against a very good defensive squad under Coach Mike Elko?
Well, we go back to the Georgia game when I thought they really just said, okay, we've got to quit turning the ball over. We're going to back off on the RPOs a little bit. We've got to be smarter. We've got to run the ball better. Maybe this last week against Monroe, they were open up their passing game a little bit more and be balanced. Either one of those without the other, I think they're going to struggle. I think early downs is going to be a key where Texas A&M doesn't just get to pin their ears back.
Yeah, and getting off to the fast start. Now, we've seen that from this Auburn team this year, but it hasn't always meant that you're going to have that kind of explosiveness on offense for the next 3.5 quarters. We saw it against Cal. You go down, you score on your opening drive. What are you telling your team if you're Hugh Freeze? We know that DJ Durkin and that defense, they've continued to get better, but without it becoming monotonous or it seems like just rinse and repeat, what are you telling your team this week to try to get them stirred up?
Yeah, I think when you start getting to these last games, you really can hone in and say, man, this is playoff atmosphere. This is a playoff game for us. And players know. I mean, they see a light at the end of the tunnel. In some ways, they go, well, this thing's about to be over. So what can we do right here? We're in front of the home folks. They know they're going to get up for the Alabama game. So they've had some break. They've had some rest. They had the win. We're going to have a great crowd. We're going to have tons of people watching us. Let's win this game for each other, and let's go out and finish this season on a great high note. Maybe win these last two, but if they can win this game, they'll have a chance in the last one, obviously.
The Iron Bowl is the best rivalry in all of college athletics. It's one of the best rivalries we have, in my opinion, in sports here in the United States of America. And while that game is big, I think for Auburn, based on their season, you just try to get a win. You're trying to get a win against a quality opponent at your home place. Meanwhile, for Texas A&M, I think it's a little bit more tricky because you're reuniting with a program you hate from across the state. You didn't want them to come into your conference, and everybody's circling the Longhorns coming in to College Station for that final game and your chance to potentially spoil Texas in a berth in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and I think when people say trap games, and I always – as a coach, trap.
Do you hate that?
Yeah, to a degree, but it does make sense because we're just saying they're looking ahead and not even trying not to. Hey, we're trying not to look ahead, but you cannot wish your way through this next game, and that's how you get beat. So this is a real tricky for them. Auburn, obviously, I think is going to play their best. So can they get through this game at Auburn with a great crowd? We've talked about, Auburn's offense against Texas A&M's defense. I think vice versa. I think Auburn's defense has been playing good enough to give them every opportunity. Those little things, the turnovers, field goals, where they've had some field goals before half. Some of those things that have bit Auburn in the butt, that's going to be the difference, the little things.
I think, and you answer this question, but the reason you disliked and didn't like the term trap game as a head coach, because that implies that this just caught you totally by surprise, and you weren't saying ad nauseum until you were blue in the face during the week. Guys, pay attention.
Right.
This is a team that can beat us if we don't play well. Is that accurate?
That's it. And there's not a ton of difference in these teams. We could go back to how many plays and see Auburn on the other side. The question is, to me, about mentality. Texas A&M feels like they've got everything to play for. What does Auburn feel like? I hadn't seen anything less than them playing hard. But what is going to be the difference in those little details, those plays that have really cost Auburn all year?
All right. Meanwhile, very similar situation with a matchup coming up in Norman, Oklahoma. Alabama traveling out there. It's been a minute since the Tide has played the Sooners there in that stadium. For Alabama, college football playoff rankings coming in, you feel pretty secure about where you are, possibly playing in an SEC championship game if you win out in the regular season. Meanwhile, for Oklahoma, Coach Brent Venables, and he's a friend of yours, wow, they've been decimated with injuries, the offensive side of the ball, and Seth Luttrell, he has to let his offensive coordinator go. Mm-hmm. That is something that this program, that fan base, is not accustomed to. But you better bet your bottom dollar they have circled this game, and those fans at least on Saturday in Norman, Oklahoma, are going to be keyed up for the Tide.
Yeah, I think it's so similar to what we just discussed. I think Oklahoma, very capable on defense. You're going to get a scheme that's different. You're getting three safety defense. You're getting multiplicity. You're getting a quality defense. Offensively, I saw some things with them maybe last week, but they're struggling up front. They've had all the turnover issues, which has plagued them throughout the year. And as Coach Venable said, if we can just quit turning the ball over, that is these things. And I was talking to a coach yesterday morning about this whole RPO world. When you put everything on the quarterback, and those are the things that sound good, and they sound like that's the way to go, and then you turn the ball over because the receiver runs a wrong route, et cetera, which, that could be a whole show. We could discuss RPOs. So done correctly, they're good. I think that's the question. Is there enough offense for Oklahoma? I don't think there is, but is there enough offense for Oklahoma to let them compete?
I do want to ask you about Oklahoma, and that's going to be the spotlight for me in that game. That defense, and that's the strength of that team still, versus Jalen Milroe and the Alabama offense. If I can remember going back early in the season, it's when Tennessee, they were rolling at the time. They went into Norman, and if I can recall, defensively, some maybe unorthodox things that you see, especially at the safety position. Yep. Describe that and how it could potentially affect the Alabama offense.
Yeah, so if you got to hear us early in the year, which I hope you did, we talked about the 3-1 box where that extra safety is back in there trying to talk you into run the ball, and we're going to take away all these quick throws. Now, Alabama's not as much a now screen team as maybe Tennessee is, but you're going to get a lot of multiplicity, a lot of empty formations to run the quarterback. I promise you they're going to give them things that are unique that they have not seen. The difference is right now Milroe's healthy. And the way he's playing, the way they're running the ball, the way they're using him where it's a 1-2 read on the same side of the field, hey, we're looking over here, 1-2, take off. I think they found what they need to do with him, but I think they are going to see some unorthodox things from Oklahoma.
And I think the mentality, if you're Kalen DeBoer, you're realistic. You're not looking for style points, but it's survive and advance and try to come out of this thing unscathed and not having a critical injury at a time. It could affect you not only in this game, next week at Bryant-Denning against your rival in Auburn, but potentially if it comes down to having to decide but for the college football playoff and you lose in an SEC championship game, we saw it with Florida State last year. Heaven forbid that happens, but it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've seen in Alabama was the change in discipline. I think we saw that in the Vanderbilt game, where I didn't see the discipline that I want to see, out of my team. Not horrible, just the things that really set you apart. And it sounded like not only did the coaches see it, but their players saw it. Where they said, look, this is what it takes to win. We know what it looks like. We're going to start calling people out. We're going to start holding people accountable. And that's what you really want when the light bulb goes off on the players as much as it does the coaches. And they started holding people accountable. And that's what they've looked like in these last few games, that they're getting how important discipline and all the little details that win for you.
Speaking of details and discipline and winning for you, our friends at Webb Concrete and Building Materials, they bring us the building blocks to victory every single week. Phil Webb, he's so philanthropic and just a true gentleman, and all that he does here in the state of Alabama and the surrounding area. But also, I hear they've got somebody in their flooring department that does pretty well as well.
Yeah, they got a former player of mine named Jacob Clark, who just happens to be my son. So he's at the Pell City branch where they got lumber concrete. Obviously, he does the flooring, but you've also got Center, Roanoke Ready Mix. You've got Oxford Ready Mix, and with a showroom also, Heflin, Birmingham, and Homewood locations.
Well, the College Football Playoff Committee, they have their weekly rankings, but Coach Bill Clark, you want to get your Alabama Power 5 of the week. There's no better source. Coach, who do you have for us this week?
Well, I'm probably going to be traditional with kind of what the AP and those guys are saying. 1 is Oregon, 2 is Ohio State, 3 is Texas, 4 is Penn State, 5 is Indiana, 6 is Notre Dame. Now, here's where I differ a little bit. 7 is Alabama, 8 is Ole Miss, 9 is Georgia, 10 is Miami, 11 is Tennessee, 12 is Boise State. Obviously, we're very disappointed that BYU is out of this ranking. They're slightly out. Very disappointed in that.
You sneaky. I asked you about it earlier in the week. Did you consult with Lance Leipold and the Kansas Jayhawks, who went into Provo, a 3-6 football team, had underperformed, and all they did was come out of there and win? And I went back and I watched that Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl from Shreveport from just a few years ago, and it looked eerily similar to a game plan that you had.
It's very possible. They probably went back and copied that. So
checks in the mail from Lawrence, Kansas.
That's right. We'll be looking for it.
Once again, it's time for our Donahue Chevrolet Drive for Success. Coach, what do you have for us this week?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about 3 different games. We're going to briefly discuss Army Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame, we know what they did to Navy. So they're going to have a pretty good chance of defending that Army run game. I think it's going to be exciting. I cannot wait to watch this game. But Notre Dame does not have to get unsound. They've got so much talent on the defensive side. They know what they're doing. But that's going to be a great game. Obviously, Army, quarterback's been banged up. Is he well? So that's the question we got on them.
I've just looked at Army all season, and no disrespect to what Navy did, especially earlier in the season. And I know this sounds crazy talking about one of the Service Academy teams, and I do not mean this in any way disrespectful. But Army seems more blue collar on both sides of the ball in what they do. And maybe it's because it's a little more simplistic, whereas now you have Drew Cronick coming in and adding some flair to that offense. And it was a lot of fun to watch. But just seeing both teams up close, I felt like Army, especially with their quarterback when he was well, they wanted to inflict pain every single play.
Yeah, one of the things I would love to talk about at some point, and I think we could get to this, is training. And that was something I prided us on, me being an old strength and speed guy from way back, how we train, coaches being involved. That's their whole program is built on this. Obviously, talent-wise, how you rate talent and speed and some of those things, maybe they don't have those folks, but we're going to talk about their defense. But not ever giving in and not quit. And they've built their offense and defense around that mentality. So it's going to be a good one. Obviously, Notre Dame, I think they're about a 2-touchdown favorite. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and Army set up to play in the AAC championship game, and most likely they're going to be playing Tulane and John Summerall. That should be interesting. But that game with Notre Dame, they're at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. You'll have a great crowd there. Of course, we know Notre Dame, they're a national brand, but as is Army, I think that's got a chance and the potential to be a lot more entertaining than what we got with Navy and Notre Dame earlier in the season.
Yeah, we'll see. We're going to see how they defend it. I do think, like I said, they're not going to have to get unsound because they got those kind of people. And you got a defensive-minded head coach. So it's going to be interesting, but Army's got a really good defense. We're going to talk about them in our last segment.
College football playoff implications for this next game. And this would be so Lane Kiffin. Sorry, Ole Miss fans. But Ole Miss traveling to the swamp, take on a Florida team. We saw what they did to LSU. DJ Lagway, pardon my French, but he's hell when he's well.
Yeah.
Looks like he's well. Rebels better look out.
Yeah, I think Florida was an underachieving team, in my opinion, before with all this NIL, the way they were handling it and some of those things. But it sounds like they rallied around their coach. We saw if Lagway doesn't get hurt against Georgia, that might have been a different game. They're playing very solid defensively. They did a really good job against LSU last week. This is a huge game. Obviously, Ole Miss knows what they're playing for. Sometimes I think that's hurt them. Can Coach Kiffin keep that mentality he had against Georgia and not trying to do too much? We've talked about analytics and going for every single fourth down. I thought he played it smarter in that game, which, I know he's got a super aggressive personality. We know he's done a great job. So this will be a great game. This will be very interesting to watch.
I look at what Florida defensive coordinator, and he was a defensive coordinator at Auburn last year, Ron Roberts, has done against some of their rival opponents. I remember the game plan that he had for Tennessee there at Neyland Stadium, and that was a close loss. I remember what he was able to do against Georgia and limiting them, and maybe by the end of the game, if you have your starting quarterback, we're talking about a different outcome. This is an Ole Miss offense that he has seen, and he faced them just last year. I've just got a sneaky suspicion that Ole Miss and that offense are going to get all that they want and more from Florida on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, Ron's a friend of mine. We used to, we were very multiple. You'd see us in Okie, you'd see us in 4 down, you'd see us in 3-3. And as we were playing in our 3-4 look, that was his background, and we would have a clinic every year online. And he just does a good job. Wealth of knowledge. Was a head coach at the FCS level, and he's, I think that was a great addition for them.
Contender or pretender, the game that a lot of people are talking about nationally. Indiana, Curt Cignetti had a bye week last week. Last time they played, we saw him take care of business. It wasn't flashy, but a 5-point win at home over Michigan. You got to travel there to the Horseshoe in Columbus, Ohio. What this means, and Curt Cignetti, I've told you this all season, Coach. I love that team, they play for their coach, they play together.
Yeah.
That almost, unfortunately, has become a rarity these days in the NIL era and the transfer portal era. There's something about this Hoosier team. They're not the most talented, but golly, they play with pluck and grit, if you will.
Yeah, so you go say they're defensively, they're a multiple 4 down. They do a great job of disguise. They've got a good D-line. And, and really that's where it starts. That's how we always try to build our teams at UAB defensively, was that front, really on both sides of the ball. But I've been very impressed with them defensively. Offense, they spread it around. They're very multiple. They've had the really good quarterback. What a great year he's had. This senior transfer, the really good running back. So I think they've got a lot of pieces, and then they've got a head coach with a lot of confidence. So open date, huge deal. I think with a really good coach, that makes all the difference for them. But we know how good Ohio State is. They're talented. They've got a great coach. They feel like they're on a mission. Obviously, they've got Michigan coming up, and they want to get some revenge there. This is going to be a terrific game. I can't wait to watch it.
I'm just interested. I want to get your instant reaction. I didn't tell you I was going to ask this, but on the broadcast, you had Joey Galloway recommend that Kurt Cignetti sit as starting quarterback. Why run the risk of the quarterback getting injured and the threat of being left out of the college football playoff, a lot like what Florida State did?
That's insane. So we know that won't happen, but
that's the reaction I wanted.
Yeah, I mean, what are you talking about?
He cleaned it up for the show.
Right.
You were thinking something else.
Yes, holy cow. I just wonder sometimes if guys will say stuff just to get a reaction, knowing that's the craziest thing they could say.
Right.
So,
well, what's not crazy is our friends at Donahue Chevrolet. They do a wonderful job. You're never going to pay a dealer dock fee, and there's so many things that you have to look forward to when you visit the dealership there in Fort Payne.
Well, first, let's give a shout-out to Ryan Donahue. Hit a big three-pointer for UAB. You can see that all over social media. I know his dad. I talked to him. He's very proud of that. But the guys at Donahue just really do a great job as far as taking care of you. You got people you can talk to. And, of course, they've got a great product in all their Chevy products. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the Tahoe, but 1.9% APR for 60 months on a 2024 Chevy Silverado 1500. We talked about last week they have deals for service people and first responders and teachers. So go in there, and I'm sure they got a deal for you.
Well, obviously, we have a defensive mentality on the show. One of the best to ever call it, coach it, Coach Bill Clark, and one of the best when it comes to our country, national security, and a company that we talk about every single week. It's Radiance Technology.
Yeah, so first, Radiance Technology, before we talk about Army, which is really a good segue with Radiance Technology doing so much for our Department of Defense. Those are the guys that are creating these lasers to shoot drones down, and so many great things. Obviously, we talked about them being a sponsor of the Shreveport Bowl, the Radiance Technology Bowl. Let's talk about Army's defense. I think they're tied for first, 10.5 points a game. Got the big game with Notre Dame coming up. Let's talk about what they do. I think that's one of the things when we kind of go behind the scenes. So having studied the Army throughout the year, what you would think, kind of like we were alluding to with Rice, we got some really smart guys. Yeah, some really smart guys over there. The thing we've got with these guys, though, is just this tenacity and this not quitting. People would probably be surprised, though, that they do have some good athletes over there, but defense is so much about getting lined up, multiplicity, showing different looks, getting off blocks, and then tackling. And I think what I've seen out of these guys, they give so many different looks. And you're going to see cover zero, which you would say, how do these guys play cover zero? But doing things that are abstract, that are different. Obviously, you got to see them up close and personal when UAB played them.
Yeah, the motor's always running with every single one of those guys. And you talk about from the head up and some things that they're able to do where you have the luxury of doing that because they're so cerebral and changing that picture right before the snap at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, making it look like a too high and we're going to be in zero. Make it look like zero and we're going to bail out. I think that's what they're good, along with their training in the off season, which I think lends right, just the way I believe, runs right into a great defense.
Our friends at Buffalo Rock, Jimmy Lee, that staff, they do such a wonderful job. They've been a mainstay not only here in Birmingham, but in the state of Alabama. I noticed they got a new location. They've just opened up there in the Tuscaloosa area. But whether it's Dr. Pepper or all the great products they have there at Buffalo Rock, we certainly appreciate them.
Yeah, and what a great job those guys do. I think they've got over 60 different drinks that come through their locations, but they have food. But main thing, philanthropic, Jimmy Lee, Buffalo Rock. We appreciate them and obviously Dr. Pepper and how much they support college football.
We'll talk about the coaching carousel, and maybe we don't see it as much at the Power 4 level this year, formerly the Power 5. If you want to say Power 5, we'll accept it. But out of the American Athletic Conference, we have already seen it. We saw it with Mike Houston, the first to be let go there at East Carolina. Mm-hmm. Next, you've got Bloomgren. He's out at Rice. You mentioned that earlier in the show. Then the Temple coach. Not a huge surprise, but when it happened, maybe. And then this week, we get Tom Herman at FAU in year number 2, not even a complete 2 seasons. And then the lovable, huggable Not really. Biff Poggi without sleeves there at Charlotte.
That's an unusual look.
Were you surprised first by FAU and their decision to go ahead and part ways with Herman? And what did you think about Biff Poggi being out so quickly there in Charlotte?
I think what we've done, we've really brought in even more pressure on these coaches with the fact with NIL. And I'm not questioning what the job they did or didn't do. I think we've just added another layer of people wanting success because you've now went and asked more people to give and to be part of your program. And I used to say that all the time. I said, you guys got high expectations. You can't have higher expectations than I have myself. But I think that's what we're creating, where people are understanding how important success is, not just to their team and their fans, but their whole school. And just the morale of a school is so tied to their program, which I've always said and I've always believed. So obviously, that's one league that's really, it's almost like each one has begat the next one.
I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you. I'm going to take East Carolina off the board.
Yeah.
Of those four, how would you rank them as far as maybe desirability? I'm not talking about somebody who just wants a chance and they'll go and coach anywhere. I'm talking about coaches, seasoned coaches, and going in and knowing you have a chance to be successful.
I know that this probably sounds like a cop-out. I would really, in today's world, I would say, all right, let's lift the hood up. Okay, what are you paying your head coach? That's one. But what are you paying for this pool of assistants? And then the third piece is NIL. So we've got to go in there and look, because that really tells you how committed that you are. I'll hear, okay, you've got this great reserve of money, but are you willing to put it forward? And then, of course, you've got paying these former players. You've got the cutback to, now we're at 105. What does that look like when we raise the hood up and say, okay, just how committed are you? Because that's going to tell you a lot. So that's what I'd like to see. Okay, how is, because I saw what East Carolina was doing before. They had a financial commitment. Don't know about NIL. I'm wondering what these other guys have.
Okay, and I totally get that. You want to look under the hood. If I just ask you desirability, quality of life, is it Philadelphia? Is it Boca Raton? Is it Houston? Or is it, who have I missed, Charlotte?
I think all those are great places. I mean, obviously, Boca Raton, from having been there, is great. We've been to Charlotte. I think those two got, East Carolina, we didn't talk about Greensboro. I think those are all good. I know you're trying to get me to say something here. Probably will not say that, other than to say they're all good programs. I don't have any real knocks on any of them. I'd have to look at each one.
Bill Clark for governor coming soon here in the state of Alabama. Well, Coach, it's been another exciting episode. Hopefully, Pat Smith, I would say get well, but he's fine.
Make the cookies,
He
Pat.
just chose to be, what was it you said?
Big Pat, little team.
Yeah, that's what I wanted right there. Well, for the Coach Bill Clark, for Pat Smith, Molly Robinson, I'm Landry Roberts. Thank you to all of our corporate partners, and thank you to you for tuning in every single week. This is the Bill Clark Show.
This has been the Bill Clark Show.